you actually have a piece up on Open Secrets that's in the banner at the top of the site right now that you helped write on this exact issue. Now it takes both a very long-term look at spending on guns in American elections over the years, but also has some really great information on just this election cycle. For instance, I think you guys have listed out every issue, right, and how much money has been spent on that particular issue so far in this election. And right now, and now this is across all groups, right? So we've talked about the NRA and Everytown, and those are the two largest groups, right? Those are the two largest players as far as money raised and spent goes. But there, of course, are other groups involved as well, especially on the gun control side. You know, you have Brady PAC. So, well, first off, Everytown's Super PAC has raised $11.6 million this year, which compares to the NRA Super PAC, which is at $7 million. Although the NRA also has its PAC that it is really its main focus, it seems to be, at least as far as fundraising goes, at $17.7 million through, and these numbers were just updated last night, right?
They were, yes. And so we're taping this on Friday, since I know you said this will air Monday. This is all coming in on Thursday night. This is the pre-general election filing. So we're getting the final weeks of the election, seeing how much is being raised, how much is being spent by pretty much every group that's spending on federal elections. We're still going to see some outside spending disclosures over the next few days leading up to the election, since that's something that gets updated every single day. But this is the last big disclosure of receipts and like a full itemization of disbursements that aren't those independent expenditures, the vote for, vote against language.
Mm-hmm. But in addition to Everytown and the NRA, especially on the gun control side, you do have other groups that are raising a lot of money in their PAC and Super PAC, which would be, Brady, for one, has raised about $3.3 million, according to the latest FEC data here. And then Giffords especially has raised, $12.7 million through its traditional PAC, or I guess the FEC calls it a hybrid PAC. But
and just to
and then
clarify,
you also have on the.
So I was going to say what a hybrid PAC is. So a hybrid PAC is basically both a combination of a super PAC and a PAC. It's called a carry committee is the official term for it. So basically it allows that group to both give to candidates and spend on independent expenditures, just to kind of explain what that means the group is able to do.
That's actually a new term to me. So why, I guess, when did that start to be a new way of organizing, and why aren't all the groups just doing it that way?
Well, it's been around for a number of years. You have to be very careful with segregated funds with this. And so many groups prefer to just have independent groups kind of exchanging funds through that.
For paperwork purposes, I guess. I
would assume so. Accounting can get easier depending on what their purpose really is. But in this case, there are specific restrictions that they're subject to and specific reporting rules. But in this case, they are able to both give and to spend on independent expenditures. One of the things that super PACs are not able to do, and so you have to be really careful with if you have them both in the same group, is coordinate with candidates, whereas PACs to some extent can. They can give money to candidates, carry committees can. So this group would have to be very careful with ensuring they're not coordinating if they're both spending and giving to candidates.
Yeah, and there's actually an active case against the NRA for alleged coordination with the Trump campaign back in 2016 through its super PAC. So these can be, very fraught in terms of legal responsibilities to separate that money. So yeah, I mean that's interesting though that Giffords has this sort of combined group.
It's actually more common than you would think. There's a lot of groups that have it. The hybrid PAC setup. A number of groups have migrated towards that in recent years, but you still have, of course, a lot of super PACs and traditional PACs as well. Interesting.
So so Giffords has about 12.7 million in their group, and then you have the National Shooting Sports Foundation as well, which is another pro-gun group. Obviously, they represent the industry, They're the trade group for the gun industry. They raised about $800,000 in their trade association PAC. And then you have Gun Owners of America has a super PAC, which has about $100,000 in it. So those groups exist, but they're under $1 million combined on the right. So most of the money on the right, when it comes to election spending, comes from the NRA. Is that fair to say?
It is. They really are the leading gun rights group when it comes to political spending. And when it comes to lobbying spending, they really overshadow groups like the National Shooting and Sports Foundation and the Gun Owners of America. This is something that we've seen for a number of years. As the NRA has faced more turmoil and issues in recent years, to some extent, the Gun Owners of America and the NSSF have tried to capitalize on that and at least assert themselves in their varying camps, with Gun Owners of America kind of pushing for more politicization and pushing in from the right, saying the NRA is too liberal and kind of pushing for more of those more further right candidates, whereas NSSF has kind of stepped in for a less political approach. And so you have kind of them coming at it from both angles, but the NRA is still the predominant gun rights group, even with all of that.
Yeah, money-wise.
Yes.
Money-wise, it's really not close. And
not at all.
The real competition here is between Everytown, Giffords, and Brady, and the NRA, because the other pro-gun groups are relatively small. And in this particular area, obviously, you also have the legal fight and political battles that are separate from spending, but in this area, it's the NRA versus the gun control groups.
Right, and that's kind of an interesting dichotomy because you have such a concentrated power with the gun rights groups just within that, with the NRA, whereas with gun control, you do have multiple different groups that are kind of these leading, of course, Everytown being like, to some extent, the big group, but you do have no independent group can really rival the NRA when it comes to overall money, at least over the years. We have seen gun control groups spending more increasingly on both lobbying and political contributions. They've really kind of, to some extent, caught up. Whereas if you look back maybe 2 election cycles, the NRA and gun rights groups generally were just completely overshadowing them altogether. But they still are, the NRA and gun rights groups are still well ahead when it comes to fundraising and spending.
Yeah, it seems like in this cycle so far, the NRA is still outpacing the combined gun control groups, but not by that much, right? That's what these numbers would seem to tell us, and that's also what the ranking that you guys have put together.
And it goes back and forth too, as we've checked over different filings, as we get them over the different months. We have seen certain months where gun control groups have suddenly gotten ahead of gun rights groups, and so it's much closer than it used to be, whereas it used to be not even a competition.